welcome to the Intuitively Wild podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Levine. Living intuitively wild is about coming back home to ourselves. Here, we talk about how to live connected to ourselves, others, and nature, and make a commitment to radical authenticity, vulnerability, and acceptance. On this podcast, we delve into a wide range of topics that span the human experience. We peel back the layers and talk about the things that are often not talked about. This is a space for us all to walk and wander this path of life together. Let's dig into our roots and go deep. Uma, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you here for the second time. If for those of you who didn't listen to Uma's first podcast conversation, I highly recommend it. We talked about grief and finding your life path and purpose, and Uma's wisdom is just seeped into that conversation, everything she does. So just really excited and honored to have you back.
It was such an honor to be here, Rachel. Thank you for inviting me back. I really enjoyed our last conversation, and I'm sure this one's going to be what it needs to be as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm really excited about the topic that we're going to delve into today. But before we get into that, I know you answered this question the first time, but I don't remember what you said. So, what is something that you wish people knew about you that you don't think many do?
I think many people think that because I'm teaching this stuff and talking about this stuff on podcasts, that somehow I am healed and I'm way ahead of the journey. I just want people to know that neither me nor any other spiritual teacher or mentor or coach you work with is all there. We are part of the human journey, and every time we reach a new level, an up leveling, if you will, we're going to be tested again. So it's just deepening into what we know, what we trust, what we give attention and power to. And I just want everyone to know I'm as human as all of you.
Yeah, that's so powerful because I think it can be easy to see people who do present so wise and who do the kind of work you do, helping people, understand themselves and figure out their path and purpose, and put them on a pedestal and really think that they have it all together. And I've experienced this within myself and my own path, people thinking that I have my life together more than I do. And I think that when it comes to any type of when it comes to looking up to someone, especially in the spiritual world, like these gurus, things go wrong when we place them on a pedestal and think that they are these perfect beings. But really, healing is a spiral. We're constantly unraveling and peeling back more layers, and the work is just, it's never done, and we're all in it together. So I love that you said that.
It feels really important to say that in this moment because we know that people are desperately seeking and searching. And I find that there are teachers, leaders, gurus, whatever they call themselves, who present themselves in a way like if their community or their followers don't listen to what they say, they're not going to be able to get on the path or be enlightened or find transcendence. And I want to say, you are your best healer, master, guru. So never outsource your wisdom to anybody. Learn from others who you're inspired by, but always come home to you and seek to find that resonance.
Yes, I always say, and I believe this so deeply, that the best teachers bring us back to ourselves.
Mhm.
And Uma and I met in a human design group for human design teachers. And I think that you can find it even in the human design space, people being placed on pedestals and liking that. But for me, human design is a tool that can allow people to be more empowered and teaches people to be their own guide. And I think it's so important to have more people in that space talking about it in that way. So I love that we're aligned on that.
Yeah, me too.
And I think that actually your new book, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about today, is a way for you to do that because you talk about your path. It's a memoir, and you talk about your path, and you're very open and raw about your journey and how you've learned so much through your journey. And you peel back the layers to show people that you're learning and growing as you go, and you've allowed that to change you and impact you. And so I'm curious, what made you decide to write this book? And what was the turning point when you felt ready to do so?
Hmm. You know, writing a marriage memoir isn't an assignment of joy, right? So, this book has been knocking on the doors of my heart for almost 7, 8 years now.
Wow.
And I ran from it because I was terrified to write the story. First of all, it felt like a very private, tender story. It's a story of my marriage. And to peel the curtain back on that felt scary, vulnerable. Um, it's like that moment when you send your child off to college and you want that child to be safe and you want to bubble wrap that child before they go off to college. That's sort of the feeling I had about this story. Wanted to bubble wrap the book and pray that it would be accepted gently with tenderness and kindness. But as a writer, I also know that the moment you send your story out into the world, it belongs to the reader. They bring to it what they will bring to it, and that's not
Mm.
within our power to control. The reason why I finally said yes to my soul nudge to write the book was because I kept running into women who presented the same question that I seek to explore in my book, which is how do two people who love and respect each other deeply walk hand in hand when they're walking very different soul paths? I kept running into women who said, "Where can I buy your book?" And I said, "Well, right now it's just an idea in my head and I'm even terrified to write it." But it was my soul's way of saying, "See, there's a need for this. There are many women who are struggling with this question, and you have been given the story to live. You have been given the gift of writing. You are a published author, and it is your sacred responsibility to sit down and create this book." So it felt like the book had a bigger purpose, and for me to use my personal fear and limitations and insecurities as blocks and not letting myself show up and write the book felt like it would be a disservice. And that's why I decided to write it.
Mm. Yeah, I it can be so easy for us to quiet the words that are really trying to push out of our throat, push against our heart. And I think it's a very personal process to sit with ourselves and be like, do I want to hold this in because it does feel very personal and private and that feels an integrity for me? Or is it out of fear? And what is my true path here? What is my true calling? And really having the courage to be honest with ourselves about that
Yeah,
and to listen to that.
that's such a good point you bring up about what needs to remain private and what needs to get told. And those are choices you make as you're writing the book. You decide which stories um, are worth sharing, are worth which stories sort of weave into and align with the theme of the book, and which stories feel private. And it's a fine line because when you write a marriage memoir, you have to tell some stories that are uncomfortable.
Mm.
The reader knows when you're shying away from speaking the truth about something. A reader is an intelligent human. And so when I read a book, I can sense whether the author is telling me the complete truth or holding back in some way, just giving me a little peek into that story, but actually pulling the curtain very quickly so that I don't see the entirety and I can't feel into their experience. The writer, I am as afraid as I am to be vulnerable on the page. um, I know that it is part of my sacred integrity to write the story and tell the whole truth, no matter how uncomfortable it is, because it's in the telling of the vulnerable tale that the reader sees herself reflected in the story and begins to understand I'm not the only one feeling this. There are other people out there who've lived this story, who are living this story. That creates a connection, a bond, a sense of empathy. And if you don't offer the reader a chance to experience that empathy, then why bother?
It's so true. Why bother? And it's interesting what you said about how once you write and once you put the story out into the world, it's no longer yours.
Yeah.
And we can feel like what we're writing is a raw slab of our heart that we're offering to the world. And because I love writing as well, and that can feel very true. And at the same time, although the reader knows they're reading about us, they see themselves in that experience. And the more vulnerable and open and human and messy we are, the more the other person can place themselves in that position and really be immersed in the book for themselves versus just seeing it as the author's story.
Exactly right. Because it is in the place of fear and anger and hurt and wounding that we see each other reflected in the other's story. And so often we mask that. We wear our armor of success and confidence and are having it all together, which is what we present to the world. And yet people read books to learn the truth of what's behind the scenes.
Mm.
So it felt really important for me to write some scenes that were hard but felt necessary and important for them to be in the book.
Yeah, and I think that also this is true about all memoirs, but especially a marriage memoir. There's another person involved in these stories in an equally raw way. And so I'm curious how you approached that, and also the fact that your book was sharing someone else's story.
Hmm. Great question again. I knew that if my husband said no to me writing the book, I would have shut down the project. I knew that because you're right, it's a sacred contract in a marriage between two people. And it's not just my story, and yet the story doesn't exist without the two people. So, in some ways, when you are telling your story, it involves the story of another. No matter what story it is, it could be a friendship, it could be you writing about something that happened at the workplace. A story involves being in relationship. So, by definition, a memoir involves writing about other people. So, when I finally found myself sitting down to write the book, Um, I was writing it with an online group every Friday evening. We lived in Germany at the time, my husband and I. And he said to me, "What you're working on something, right?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm writing a story about our marriage, and that's all I'm going to say right now. I can't share more." And
Mm.
when he didn't say, "No, I need to know. I need to know what you're writing and whether it's okay for you to write," he didn't say anything. He just said, okay. And I kept writing, kept sharing, and then finally the manuscript came together. But I knew that I would never publish it without his okay. So one afternoon, with my, entire body trembling, I invited him into the conversation and I said, I have something to tell you. So we sat down. And just for context, for just so the listeners know, my husband and I recently celebrated our 34th wedding anniversary. So we've been married a long time.
Mm.
And I said to him, this is the story of our marriage. And the fork in the road that happened when my spiritual awakening happened, when my mother died in January of 2009, and how my life sort of fell apart and fell back together, but I had to walk a different path. And that's when the dynamic in our marriage shifted because he didn't understand my spirituality, my awakening. And I said, I've written the story of that. And I said, I'd love for you to read it. So he said to me, um, so why didn't you tell me? And I said, I was just nervous because if you had said no, I would have shut it down. I wouldn't have written it. He said, you're a writer. You write. That's what you do. That's all he said. So I
Mm.
emailed him the manuscript, but he kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. He just didn't read it until we got to a stage where it was about to be published. It had been edited. I'd gotten feedback from my beta readers. And he lives a busy life. Let's honor that as well. He travels a lot on work. And so to read a nearly 400-page manuscript was a tall order. So when it came time to publish it, I said, okay, this is your last chance because once it's out there, then there's nothing you can do about it. And he said, you know what? I'm just going to read it when it's published. And
Wow.
that spoke volumes of his trust in me and my writing. So he read it after it was published, and he looked at me and said, you've made me look too shiny. That's all he said. I don't agree with that entirely, but I'll let the reader be the judge of that.
Mm.
So it was amazing that he offered me the permission. He also set up a book launch event for me. We had a book launch event in early June of 2025, and it was a love fest because all the people in the room who came together loved me and they wanted to celebrate my book. And so it was just a beautiful demonstration of his love for me, my husband's love for me, and his deep honoring of my sacred work.
Wow, that does speak so much to his trust in you and in the relationship and his respect for you and also his belief in you and your writing and your talent and that just that says so much about your relationship
Mhm.
and the fact that he didn't read it before it was published and that's yeah, that's really touching. That's really special. And one of the main questions that you delve into in your book is what to do when you're at and correct me if I'm kind of paraphrasing it wrong in some way, but what to do when you're at a certain crossroads in your relationship where you're growing and evolving and pursuing this spiritual path and your partner isn't, or they're growing and evolving in a different way. And of course, you can't touch on everything in the book, but I would really love to hear your thoughts on that question because that's actually something that I've talked about with a lot of people in my life, personally and professionally, because I think it's very common for especially women to go down this spiritual path or this healing path and for their male partners to not be following suit. And that can take on different dynamics, whether you're married or in a new relationship. But I think
Mhm.
especially the fact that you guys were married for quite some time when this started to happen, that, adds a whole extra layer. So I'm really curious your thoughts around that.
One of the things I want readers to understand is that the question of what to do in a relationship that feels stuck is a very individual and personal one. So I'm not here to be formulaic or prescriptive in any way. It's also important, I think, for my readers to understand that I was born and raised in India. I met my husband, we married there. We had lived for 17 years together when my mother died. So all of that is important contextual information. And yet I find that in the Western world, when things aren't going well in a marriage or a long-term partnership, or even in a let's say 5-year relationship, the questions seem to be, should I stay and suffer or should I leave?
Mm.
And I think my book offers a third window into what's possible. Granted, both my husband's parents and my parents were married for 40 some years before one partner died. And so we come from a heritage where commitment and loyalty are important. That said, I also want to say commitment isn't shouldn't be the only reason you stay in a relationship that isn't working for you. Because I think in the new paradigm, we are here to bust all these ancient strictures and conventions, right? So in some way, it's important to do that as well as women, to find your bold, to find your voice, and to stand up for what you truly believe in. But I do believe that in our marriage, and I can only speak for the context of our marriage, we both feel that karmically we came here to learn how to let each other walk their path while walking our own. To me, it feels very, very karmic, this story of that the two of us are living, because he is a human who is basically very decent, very good, good hearted, generous, um, a wonderful provider, cares deeply for his family. And to ignore all of that and say, I think we need to walk away from each other just because you don't understand my spiritual awakening or what I'm doing, and you need to be walking alongside me, seems really shallow to me. That doesn't seem like a wise perspective, right? It seems like you're just ignoring all of who this person is just because they can't walk your path with you. And my husband, having said that, my husband supports everything I do. If I want to go to a spirituality conference, if I want to write a book, if I want to do XYZ, he's 1000% behind me. He just says, I don't understand all of this stuff. I want no part in it. I don't want to go with you to the conference. I don't want to sit down and watch a 30-minute documentary on a near death experience. That stuff just doesn't appeal to me. I don't, I feel like I'm not in the place to understand or even think about those things. He's deeply entrenched in the material world. That's where he is. His concerns are about providing for the family, um, building a safety net for a retired life. And that's where his energies are going. Now, I don't have to like it, but I have to accept it because that's who he is. That's his journey as a soul. So, my constant endeavor is every day when I wake up, I think to myself, how can I allow him to walk his path? And how can I have gratitude for all that he brings into the relationship instead of training my lens with a very narrow focus on what he's unable to give me?
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. And there are two things that I really want to highlight that you were talking about. One is the fact that only you know what is right for you, and no one else's relationship give you can tell you exactly what to do for your relationship, because someone else's life path and purpose might be to find the partner who does match them spiritually, and that might be their karmic path in this
Exactly.
life.
Yeah.
Only you know for sure what is right for you, and honoring and listening to that. And the other thing is how no one person can give us everything that we need.
Mhm.
And so your partner is not going to be everything to you. That's why friendships are really important. And that's why the relationship with yourself is really important, because your partner, it's supposed to be an interdependent relationship. And you're still going to have to support yourself and be your own guide.
Mhm.
And if we're constantly looking for our partner to be everything for us, we're going to be disappointed. And so, for in your situation with you and your husband, this one pillar isn't there with him, but you have that relationship with yourself. You find it in your other relationships.
Mhm.
And so it's okay that he's not everything to you in that way.
Exactly. And I also want to add one more thing, which is that it's important to honor one's connection needs because we come together in relationship for connection. So when that connection is missing and you're feeling the ache surfacing inside of you, to be able to have a conversation about it. That's
Mhm.
something we do, we've learned to do. We didn't do it well in the beginning. We sort of stumbled upon, tools and things that help us now. And we're not perfect at it. It's still an imperfect dance, but we are able to sit down and have a conversation with each other and to say, you've been traveling X number of days and we haven't seen too much of each other, and we need to go get coffee and just have a conversation. And sometimes it'll be just me telling him about something. He may not be entirely interested in that particular um, topic, but he knows that giving me that time is a way of honoring who I am. So just even listening to me without asking questions, because he doesn't know how to be curious about something that he doesn't feel engaged in, right? Like if you tell me to have a conversation with someone who's interested in quantum physics, I wouldn't know how to ask questions about it because I don't have knowledge of that subject. I don't have curiosity. So I wouldn't know the right questions to ask. And so understanding that something like spirituality, which is something I live, breathe, eat every day, can feel like that to someone who is not interested. So if he just sits and listens and nods and goes, and not says anything more, I have to find a way to be okay with that.
Mhm.
That's his way of honoring me. So it's important to say that connection needs are also important, because you can fall into this trap of living like two islands, and that's not a healthy dynamic either within the marriage. So finding those strands that can connect you. We both love playing a game of Scrabble. So that's something we like to do. We like going on walks in nature. So what are the connection points that are still possible? And find your connection there and keep the relationship alive and healthy in that way.
Yeah, absolutely, because everyone deserves the deep, profoundly impactful partnership that they desire,
Mm.
and there are so many avenues to get there. And I think that that's one key point that you bring up.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm curious for you, when did you was there a moment when you weren't sure if you were going to stay in the marriage, and when did you make that decision?
Oh, there was never a moment. I didn't even think about leaving. My constant question was, how do I stay in this marriage and be happy?
Mm,
And that was about turning inward and learning to love myself, because in the early years of our marriage, before my spiritual awakening, we were such a team. We did everything together. We Even when there was a crisis, and I write about this in the book, we dealt with my father's brain injury. um, there were so many things that happened in the family that we both stood hand in hand, and we guided the family through those situations and those crises. So I had grown up with a partner who loved me completely and thoroughly, that I had forgotten what it was to love myself.
mm,
So when the awakening happened and I felt him sort of pulling away, because who's this woman? I don't know my wife anymore. She's talking about things I don't understand. She's speaking a language that I have no knowledge of. That was my invitation from the divine to say, okay, this is your work now. This is not his work. He's done his work all these years. And this moment, it feels like you guys are taking a fork in the road, but this fork is going to converge somewhere, because you are going to do your work. And through the work you do, you will learn that the more you learn to love yourself, the more you learn to accept and love the other.
mm,
So that's been my path. The more I found my own self love, the more contented I am in my own company and in the work that I'm here to do. I'm totally immersed in my purpose. I live a very purposeful, meaningful life. And that is the fuel I needed. But to get there, what is my purpose? How am I going to find it? Grieving my mother's loss, walking through that fire to the path of purpose, and learning to shed the old identity, all the old things that didn't matter anymore, and to move into the space of learning to hold myself, learning to be okay with who I am. This is authentically me. It doesn't matter if nobody else understands it or likes it, but I have to be the one that is on my side no matter what. And the more I loved myself, the more I learned that, okay, people are different. And his job isn't to be here and love me to the exclusion of everything else. This is the part where I evolve differently and he's evolving in a different direction. We are still committed to each other, we still love each other deeply. And it was through my own inner awakening and my soul work that I learned to really honor him and be grateful for everything that he brings to our relationship.
Yeah, and really all of human life is a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about your path to loving yourself and how so much of it was a shedding and a releasing and acceptance, walking through the fire and kind of coming back to this core of who you are and loving and accepting it. And he had to do the same. I feel like, you know, even though he might not understand all these pieces of you, he's still seeing this essence of who you are, and you're seeing this essence of who he is. And you guys are deciding to still love and accept each other. And what is more spiritual than that?
Yeah, yeah. Because when we came to the fork in the road, it wasn't a moment of saying, do we stay together or do we leave? Do we split? It was a moment of saying, I'm going to walk a different path and you may not understand it. You may not understand why I need to do this, but I absolutely need to do this for myself. And I'm committing to this path. And it's okay if you don't understand it. I don't have the words to explain it to you because I barely understand. It was also new to me, the
Mhm.
awakening, So he had to be okay with that, but he stayed committed. He never for a moment even entertained the thought, well, if you can't be who I need you to be, I'm walking away. And so I've never for a moment entertained the thought, if you can't be with me on this journey, I'm walking away. The question always was, how do we stay together as hard as it is? Now that our paths have diverged, how do we find the connection? How do we make the togetherness work? That has
Mhm.
been the ongoing question.
Yeah. And how have you talked to, you've a daughter, correct?
Mhm.
How have you talked to her either about your the book, and if she's read it, maybe I don't, what that conversation was like, and also just relationships in general? Has this changed how you have navigated conversations around relationships with your daughter or just with anyone in your life?
Mhm. My daughter is very close to me. We have a very close relationship. And she went to grad school for creative writing. She has an MFA
Mm.
in creative writing. So we're both writers. We love talking writing. She was one of my beta readers.
Mm.
She's had a front row seat to her parents' marriage and the way it has unfolded. So we have very open conversations about this, and I think it's important to demonstrate the imperfections in your relationship with your husband, with to your children, because what she sees beneath everything is the commitment and the love. That two people can be so different and still find a way to keep the connection going. I think that's been her learning, her lesson from all of this. But I think when she was young, she went through a very confused um, phase of, if this is how different you are, how is it going to work? Right? We came to the States from India when she was barely 15. And so she was in a very formative phase of her life. And so I'm sure there was some confusion inside of her about how all of this would metamorphose and resolve itself. But I think through all the ups and downs and the hardships and our own confusion in our marriage about how we were going to navigate this space, we demonstrated to her that two people can come together and be very imperfect in the relationship, even though they've lived a decade and a half together. Like I said, my mother died when we were married for 17 years. And so moving into season two is what it felt like of the
Hmm.
marriage. So I think these lessons are very important, especially when you're having conversations with your children, if you're able to, about what's happening. In my case, that's what I did. Um, so she was privy to the tears, she was privy to some of the arguments, she was privy to me sitting down and having a reflection session with her about it. She was privy to the confusion and the not knowing of how's the connection meant to work when two people are so different. And she's now privy to, okay, my parents have somehow made this work and are continuing to make it work, and hopefully she sees the strength in that and is able to absorb some of that into her own life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so important that parents be transparent in a lot of ways around what a real relationship is like. And I think it can be easy sometimes for us to see a certain type of to think that a relationship is very one note, like it always is staying the same,
Yeah.
and also to not see all the layers of the current relationship. And the truth is, relationships are always changing. They have different acts and chapters and books, especially
Yeah.
if you're with someone for a long time. And it's not all butterflies and rainbows. And that's part of the beauty of a relationship. And I think that we set our the younger generations up for strong, healthy relationships in the future if we're able to be open and honest with them about that. And a large way we do that is through conversation and being open.
Yeah, just like nature goes through seasons, every marriage or long-term partnership also has its spring, summer, fall, and winter. And winter can come 5 years into the marriage, or summer can be 20 years into a marriage. It's not prescriptive, it's very unique to each marriage, to each ecosystem. So I think it's important to have these conversations, because how else do you educate young people about the realities of what are going on? The temptation is to shield and protect, but you can never shield and protect them from life. They have to go through life. They have to fall and fail and make mistakes, right? So if they see a similar trajectory in their parents' lives, then they know, okay, this is probably what happens in life, but we can also choose how we want to be. We can make decisions that serve the people we love and serve ourselves, and be accountable and continue to be our authentic selves.
Absolutely. And I see some flavors of this, of your story, mirrored in my parents' relationship. And I also have seen that through conversation, openness, how my parents have been able to turn more towards each other and grow with each other and get deeper with each other, even though maybe they are growing in different ways as well. And I'm so grateful to have been able to be a witness to that. And it's really benefited me. And I think so much of it comes back to communication and yeah, having those bids for connection and them being met.
Totally. Yeah.
I'm curious if you feel like this chapter or season of your life or your marriage is resolved, or what chapter or season you feel like you're in right now.
A daily prayer I say is, may I be patient with what's unresolved in my life.
I love that.
So I don't know that we get to resolve anything and have everything be wrapped up and get to see the neat little bows. I think it's more like being in the ocean, right? Some days are turbulent, some days are really calm, some days are clear, you can see to the bottom of the ocean, some days you're floundering. And so I definitely sense the deepening in the relationship. The conversations we have today, we didn't even know how to have 5 years ago.
Mm.
And I feel that moving into the next 5 years, there will be more of a shedding, more of a letting go, more of a mutual trust, but also self trust. When there's more self trust, you know how to approach a hard conversation with a calm nervous system, right? So we are still both learning the lessons of how to listen without getting defensive, because that's a biggie in relationships. So
Absolutely.
often we want to put forward our story, our point of view, our perspective, and somewhere in there is this hard line of I'm right and you're wrong. I'm going to convince you, I'm going to give you all the reasons why I'm right, right? Somewhere it slips into the conversation. So my ongoing endeavor is how can I listen with my heart instead of argue with my head?
Mm. I love that. I there were some good quotes in there. I also want to know, you said something about how you feel like you have this karmic relationship bond with your husband. And, I think a lot of that speaks to trusting yourself and intuitive knowing. And I think that a lot of people can have those feelings, but there's doubt, or it's hard to trust themselves and trust that knowing. So, what in you, I guess, two-part question, what makes you feel like this is a karmic relationship, and this is what's like karmically what is aligned for you, and how do you trust that within yourself?
Hmm. So you know I'm a projector, and my way of knowing something is just feeling it in my body. When I talk about something, there's a deep knowing, and it's always been the knowing that this is what I'm meant to learn in this lifetime. Learning to let someone else walk their path while I walk mine. And it has been affirmed through past life experiences I've had, through intuitive knowings that I've had, through meditations, very powerful meditations that I've had. The message always is this is what you came here to learn. Your soul came here to learn what it is to not have someone who adored you, loved you passionately in one season of your life, not to give you that in the next season. Not because he stopped loving me, but his love for me looks different today.
Mm.
He still loves me, just not in the way it was in the first season. I love him, but just not in the way I loved him in the first season of our coming together. And so, when constantly you receive these signs from your soul and from your guides, um, and it's played out in a past life experience where you see the two of you have come together in a past incarnation, and this is the time when we came together to get it right, to say, I depend on you, but you don't have to complete me.
Mm.
I complete myself. I'm enough as I am. So my job is to learn to feel that safety within me to let you do what you want to do, what you feel is important. Because it's out of fear that we try to pull them towards us to walk our path. It is the fear of loss of intimacy, loss of connection. And so my ongoing inquiry is if the two of us are sitting together, and silence pervades the space between us. Can that silence be the deepest form of intimacy in that moment? Are
Mm.
words necessary to foster connection? Because we've been trained to think words are the bridge, words are necessary. We need to say the things, we need to be actively engaged in each other and ask questions, and that's what listening looks like. Yes, when someone's able to do that for you, it feels expansive. But can silence also be that? And if your experience with silence has been different, if silence has felt punishing, exclusionary, if silence has felt like being silenced, silence as verb versus silence as noun or adjective, then do we need to reframe our relationship with silence? There's so much richness that is available, Rachel, when we just go within and question what we've believed in and open to a new way of thinking, a new possibility.
Mm, I agree with everything you just said. And silence is, I'm really delving into my relationship with silence and letting it be a more front and center role in my life. And I think that it is so sacred. And a lot of us are very afraid of silence. It doesn't feel safe, it doesn't feel comfortable. And I think finding safety in silence unlocks a whole new depth of life for us within our relationship with ourselves and also with our relationship with others. And it is a type of intimacy and a type of listening and knowing someone that we push away when we don't allow for that spacious silence. And it's so easy in our world these days to just fill the noise and to feel like if the noise isn't, or to fill the space with noise and to feel like if there is silence, there's something wrong. And I do think it's really important to start to reframe that and question that, which speaks to the other thing you were saying, which I loved about how it's so important to question things and
Mhm.
to allow our minds to be changed and to be open and curious and to look at life with an open mind and a sense of detachment that allows us to grow and change and allows others in our lives to grow and change without making that wrong
Exactly.
and to not grasp so tightly to try to have control and keep everything the same.
Hmm. In fact, in my deep soul writing yesterday, I do deep soul writing in my journal. My guide said to me, because I was asking about silence and
Mm.
how silence can create intimacy. So, one of the things they said was that you prefer to keep it noisy within and without because to eliminate the noise and find silence means you have to listen to your inner guidance. And sometimes what the inner guidance says is uncomfortable. So it's easier to keep it noisy within and without.
100%. So many of us are afraid of the silence because of what we'll hear in it. And we want others to give us the answers. We want the distractions. We want the disconnection, even if that's unconscious. But the lessons and the learnings and the intuition, that is often only in the silence.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm. Okay. If there was one, and you might have said it already, but one piece of advice that you would give to anyone entering a new marriage, what would you tell them?
Honor yourself. Don't become what the other wants you to become.
Mm.
Don't silence yourself. Place your needs front and center because that's not wrong. Your desires and your longings have value because desire is the birthplace of creation. So often we make ourselves wrong for having desires. I'm spiritual, I shouldn't have desires. It's about living a detached life. No, your desires change when you get on the path, but without desire, we create nothing. So, the most important two words I would say to anyone entering a new relationship is honor and cherish yourself. I mean, that was more than two words, but honor and cherish yourself completely.
Mm.
Don't lose yourself in the coupledom.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, so so important. And I think it's something that we now tell others more when they're by themselves, like, "Oh, you're single, like, do your own thing, learn about yourself." But then once we're in the relationship or in the marriage, we're supposed to more like we're supposed to do whatever we can to maintain that, or at least that's what a lot of society still tells us. But I
Right.
think it's even more important to stay true to yourself. And again, if the person's if we're meant to continue the path with this partner,
Mhm.
they will honor and cherish that within us that wants to stay true to ourselves.
Mhm. Very true. Because what does human design teach us at the end of the day? Each of us is a unique soul blueprint.
Mhm.
So to lose yourself or to somehow shapeshift because you have to please the other, you may do it in the moment, it just will never feel good to you in the long run because you will know you have betrayed yourself, and self betrayal is the worst form of betrayal.
Absolutely. And this is actually something that I love about human design is it can show us how other people's energy impacts ours.
Mhm.
And we can use that knowledge to remain true to ourselves instead of letting it take us away from ourselves, because sometimes other people's energy and how their design is can influence how we are, how we show up, and can take us away from ourselves. But with the knowledge of how we can be impacted, we can come back to ourselves. And so using it in that way, knowing we're going to be impacted by others, but that can bring us closer to ourselves, is really helpful sometimes.
Yeah, because it is our responsibility to disengage from other people's energy, right? Only we
Mhm.
can do that for ourselves.
Mhm.
Whether it is staying away from emotional drama or taking enough alone time to listen to our inner guidance or do the things that bring us joy, whatever your design and however the elements of your chart fall together, when you are bowing at the feet of your authentic self, your life will flow with more ease than you can ever imagine.
Absolutely. It's actually in my human design a lot about speaking about desires and owning our desires. And I believe that we want what we want for a reason and we're meant to talk about it. And so I'm curious if there's a current desire you have in your life right now that you might want to speak to and own.
My desire is for this book to walk into as many hands and hearts as it wants to. And my deepest desire and intention is to be a loving and faithful steward of this book's journey in the world. In other words, the book knows its journey. I'm not here to control its journey into the world. I'm here to be a faithful steward. And that's my deepest longing.
I love that so much. And it's such a beautifully written book. Like I was telling Uma, I haven't yet been able to finish it, but I'm enjoying it so much so far. And I do think it's a topic that needs to be talked about more. And I think that your book is a beautiful way to do it. So I'm grateful that you wrote it and can share it with the world. And to come to our last question, living intuitively wild means connecting to your true self and living dedicated to who you are at your core, no matter what. How do you feel like you live intuitively wild?
By listening to my intuition, by being true to myself, by not making myself wrong for who I am, by aligning with my desires and longings to serve, to be, to do, even if it disappoints or upsets other people, because I matter and my unique blueprint matters. I came here to be me, to be fully me. And that's how I live intuitively wild.
So powerful, so beautifully said. Uma, thank you so much for being here. Please share with everyone where they can find you, connect with you, get the book, all the things.
Yeah, you can go to umagirish.com. That's my website. And there's a whole books section. You can find all the links to buying my books. It's available on Amazon. Yeah, you can find all the information you need. I also write on Substack. So if you'd like to follow my writing, that's a good place. I have a podcast which is called Being Fully Me. And that's all about stories from my life, the work I do, what I'm here to share. So check all those things out. It's all available on my website.
And everything will be linked below as well. So thank you again so much for being here.
Oh my gosh, Rachel, we have the best conversations. I so adore our conversations. You ask such beautiful and deep questions. So thank you for the honor.
Oh, thank you. And I feel exactly the same. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Intuitively Wild, the podcast. I hope it helped deepen your connection to yourself, sparked some insights, and inspired you to live intuitively wild. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you would share it with others and leave a rating and review. And please reach out to me. I would love to connect with you. I will see you next time for more magic.